Hello, and welcome to today's Edifying Conversation. I'd like to begin with an acknowledgement of country. I'd like to acknowledge the Gubbi Gubbi peoples on whose unceded land I'm virtually joining you today, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I'd like also to recognize the immense contributions by Indigenous peoples worldwide to all aspects of our physical and intellectual lives, and acknowledge that colonization is an epistemically and physically violent structural project that is ongoing. The APRG, the Australian Philosophy Research Group, comprises Mary Graham, Michelle Bullis-Walker, Gilbert Berg, and myself, Simone Thornton. In effect, the APRG comes out of a provocation by Mary Graham in pursuit of the question, what could or might an Australian philosophy be? What might be unique about the way we do philosophy in Australia? What might it look like for Indigenous and white settler philosophers to work together on a philosophy founded on land, country, and place? From these questions and concerns emerges a methodology, or way of doing philosophy that foregrounds autonomous regard, as Mary terms it. To this end, we in the APRG are interested in developing what we refer to as philosophy through a series of edifying conversations. Edification for us is the process of suggesting and encouraging spiritually or ethically. In Michelle Bullis-Walker's words, edifying conversations, therefore, are encounters that work to promote engagement and exploration, providing opportunities for a responsive and relational ethic. So an Australian philosophy can and should, we think, begin in edification, to suggest and encourage ethically, to offer alternative models for public life and for public conversations. Keeping this in mind, I now turn to introduce today's edifying conversationalists, Mary Graham and Stephen Muecke. Mary Graham is a Kombu-Mary person, Gold Coast, through her father's heritage, and affiliated with Waka Waka, South Brunette, through her mother's people. She's an adjunct associate professor in the School of Political Science and International Studies at the University of Queensland in Australia, where she has lectured in Aboriginal history, politics, and comparative philosophy. She's also lectured nationally and internationally on these subjects and developed and implemented Aboriginal perspectives, Aboriginal approaches to knowledge, and at the post-graduation level, Aboriginal politics into university curricula. Stephen Muecke is Emeritus Professor of Ethnography in the Environmental Humanities program at the University of New South Wales. He started off as a linguistics tutor at the University of Western Australia in 1974. Then, after doing a doctorate on the art of oral narrative in the Kimberleys, went on to teach communication and cultural studies in Adelaide. Then writing in cultural studies from 1985 at the University of Technology, Sydney. His most recent book is with Patty Rowe, a Gularabaloo elder from Broome. The Children's Country, Creation of a Gularabaloo Future in Northwest Australia. So to start off the conversation, I'd love to ask you, Stefan, to elaborate a little more on the following quote from your paper, Ways of Life, Knowledge Transfer, and Aboriginal Heritage Trails, in which you write, economic globalization has failed and the earth needs to be rehabilitated territorially again. And then perhaps, Mary, you could expand on Stefan's response.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so that's a good start in the sense that it's global, it's starting from the big picture. And the idea that economic globalization has failed is in terms of its own ambition of economic growth that would make everybody more rich and more comfortable across the world, as if that could proceed indefinitely. You could also call it the modernization frontier, that's starting with Europe and North America, where they celebrate modernization. Other countries would be in a mode of development, getting towards that, as if that were a good place to go to. But it's failed because there's not enough room on the globe for everybody to have that kind of wealth. And there are not enough resources. And I think increasingly, if people didn't realize that in the 1950s, we certainly realize it now with the hitting the wall with climate change and hitting the wall with environmental destruction. Now, to re-inhabit the Earth territorially again means to forget that globalization story, to even underplay the importance of nations, and to go back to something we might also call bioregions, particular kinds of territories that have ecological characteristics. And I think, yeah, Mary's nodding because that, I think, fits in with notions of regional governance in Aboriginal Australia, that where you might have freshwater mobs or seawater mobs or mountain people or people of the rocks who understand their territories ecologically, and these are the I think that's the focus that where anybody, Aboriginal, non-Aboriginal, can learn from. Okay, what is this particular territory capable of sustaining? That'd be the first question.
Yeah,
so,
yeah, definitely. So is that the trails, like you're talking, in the sense of the trails? Like...
Yeah, so the trails, the trails cross territories, and and I'm thinking back to more traditional times, if we could use that word, where people would walk like boys on a pre-initiation journey, taken out by their uncles. Let's go and look at the neighbour's country as well. We'll get permission from them, and they go around and they start to learn another language a bit, and and they know the region then, not just their little set of home camps, but something more bigger. And yeah, so they've got to walk to do it.
Yeah, they got to put like effort into it. Yeah, that, you know, stretch themselves and all that. That's really interesting. Just to do with economics, I'm really taken with a particular economist you might have heard of, Michael Hudson, the American Michael Hudson.
No, I haven't read Hudson.
And I really like him because he just, what I like him for is he goes and examines old cultures way back, and he's the one who talks about that they were smart in their own way, regardless of, you know, what kind of a ruler they had, or in that sense. But because he said that economically they wouldn't entertain or keep the idea of debt going. They would get rid of debt, especially for the farmers. But debt is something that is really upsetting for societies, you know. So he talks about that right up to now in any kind of global economy. That's what should happen, not just student debt, but all kinds of debt. It's the thing that causes just a raft of problems. And I agree with that, because he just says a whole lot of things about ancient cultures. That's all. And I'm not saying it doesn't say anything, of course, naturally about indigenous, Native Americans he does, but of course in a global sense, in a world sense. But also I read a whole lot of stuff from other alternative journalism, alternative ideas, you know, around other cultures especially. And I'm probably, I don't know, it doesn't go down too well with certain people very often. Not APRG, of course. Everybody likes discussing and talking about everything. But the idea of a democracy, the part of the problem I think he talks about is a democracy with political democracy. rather it should be like the Chinese have that. And believe it or not, they do have democracy, even if it is a one-party state, a democratic economy, or an economic democracy. That is, you've got to look after all the people, everybody. So you don't allow kind of accumulation over a long period of time, too much accumulation of businesses, individuals, and so on. And the first big and apparently a whole lot of old cultures, they do have a law of obligation idea, the law of obligation idea, which is ours too, in our relationalism, with our neighbours and so on. So to me, that sounds like to look at the economics, the well-being of people first, before a whole lot of other things, even ahead of technology, and economics, of course, but the economy has to be geared towards that, and this is all over the place, I know, but the other thing is that, like whole countries, Indigenous peoples in countries like this, in states like this, sort of like the idea of modernization. Why does it always have to be seen in a westernization way? Why does westernization have to be modernization and vice versa? Because when we were the thing that I and my the approach to development with people I work with over the years is that we development, community development, economic development should come from our own terms of reference. Don't follow willy-nilly Western ways of doing things. Or be very careful and sort out terms of reference, deciding clearly, what is a Western terms of reference and what are Aboriginal terms of reference. So we have to deal with what's here now. And in our old organisation, a childcare agency it was, to do with fostering and looking after families, and things like that, being the champions of Aboriginal families, making sure they're not taken away by departments and so on. But above all, to start to give rise to, to launch other different kinds of organisations. So we did actually that, to what kind of development that people wanted, like, for example, a radio station. A radio station that started off with about a handful of people, ends up being a really big radio station, really big, and I'm not saying it's a great, it's a great thing because it's worth millions now, but they do such good work, the whole thing is carried out according to the way Aboriginal people run it, and how they, what their products, journal products and so on and so on. And another thing was a school. Everybody wanted to own Aboriginal school. And that started off with a handful of people and then ends up being a school and a high school. And again, huge income, but a private school, not a state school in many ways, but a private school in its funding and that sort of thing, So both of them and a couple of other small scale things we helped to bring about, because we made a really strong point and explained to people why we do it the way we do. This is the whole board, of course, the whole organisations, and people who work there, who came to look for jobs there, they were welcomed in the sense of not just having good what do you call it? Good, lucky to have a job, look after their family and so on. But ideas to do with community development were encouraged, strongly encouraged, come. And one of them, I remember somebody who'd worked there for a while, said they had never been asked that when they were just run by, the Department of Health, actually. It was a small group that grew larger, but the State Department gave funding to the health people, the health organisations, which gave rise to childcare and things like that. See, so they always had to wait until they got approval for things from the department. And we said, no, we're wanting things in our way. So we'll decide, whether we'll buy this, we'll have that house, a new building, rather than the broken down old one we had. And everybody wanted, so we said, well, that's it, that's enough. Don't ask permission from anybody, especially not government, even though it might have got us into trouble. And they were angry, but we said, no, this is how we operate. We operate on our own terms of reference. So that goes for absolutely everything, community development, political life, a whole lot of things, so we act like we run the country, like we've never stopped running the country, And you might say that's ideological, but it's not really. It's actually old stuff, I was on the National Congress. You've heard of that, eh? The National Congress, one of the experiments, but luckily an experiment that was designed and set up by Aboriginal people, not by the state. But there was funds from the state. What could you do? You couldn't do without it, of course. But among the a number of conferences over time, and I remember one conference attending out at Alice Springs, and they'd all sat down, a couple of hundred people, from all over the country, and they were looking at policies, various problems going on, and so on and so on. And it occurred to me when I was watching this, it was very satisfactory, because I thought what they were doing wasn't talking about the things wrong. How can we tackle all these problems, or looking at it in a problematic way. I realised that they were Aboriginal people setting about running the country.
Mm-hmm.
They just took up the habit of how they would do things anyway, would have done things anyway before. So these things we have to tackle. So how will we do that? And they're all in groups talking about this. And I thought that is fantastic. That's what I really, really liked, and made me very, very satisfied. When we do things like that, rather than looking at rather than be dominated by the deficit. You got to talk about the deficit, of course, but don't be dominated by it. So don't think of ourselves. Think of ourselves. Yes, we've all been victimized, but we're being a victim is not part of our identity. Owners and runners of country. So that's the approach that I always try to take with just a whole range of things, to do with anything. Yeah. But I love that that I was just reading before, rebooting the idea of civilization, because I've been thinking more and more about that. What is it? What is it? I remember watching. Do you remember an old historian, Clark, a British, very a tough, aristocratic, Sir something Clark.
Not Sir Kenneth.
Kenneth Clark, that's it, yes, Sir Kenneth Clark. And it was a whole series, very interesting, looking at all civilization. But I remember one particular thing that actually I was amazed at. He was there in the Vatican, outside the Vatican, the wonderful grounds, or not grounds, pillars, there are pillars, columns. And he was there and being pictured, of course, and he spreads his arms out. He spreads his arms out like this and asks rhetorically, what is civilization? This is civilization. And I thought, what? And of course he even comes from that sort of, background, of course. He has to say that. But I just couldn't get over that, what that meant, This is civilization. Not just great buildings, or cities for that matter, walled cities. You're familiar with him? He died now, I suppose.
Yeah, that was one of the first TV thing, big TV documentary events.
Yes.
In the early days, Civilization, it was simply called.
Yes.
I haven't looked at it again.
No, it's old as in the 60s, I think.
but yeah, we're conscious that the Latin origins of that word, and you mentioned walls. So it's all about walls and cities.
Yes.
But anthropologists have been able to use the word for peoples who don't have walls and cities, like the Black Civilization by Rex Warner. Wrote that back during the about the top end, might have been the Yolngu, in fact. A Black Civilization back in the might have been during the Second War that he wrote that.
Right.
So it's so we need another word for Australian civilization if we can claim that whatever we're going to call Australian civilization, it starts 60,000 years ago, and its appearance in later years with cities is just a kind of pimple on the nose of what was there all along.
What was there all along? Yes.
And so, what you need another word for that?
Yes.
Yeah,
or a different, different. Like you're saying, a different in that conversation one there. What it means, what it can mean, because there's so many things that have happened, over the thousands of years, everywhere.
And when I read that, I was thinking it was the time that Trump was wanting to build a wall to keep the Mexicans out.
Oh, yes.
and I didn't have any trouble thinking of that as a very barbarous response.
Barbarous. Yes, yeah.
It's much more civilized in a way to have a relationship with your neighbours that doesn't involve building a bloody big wall to keep them out.
Yes, yes.
And so you must have other strategies for relating to them. They have to go along the lines of diplomacy or friendship or negotiation or whatever. And you wouldn't have any trouble persuading people that set of strategies is more civilized.
Yes, exactly. That's what. I'm still trying to thinking about and talking with and trying to work out stuff to do with, say, relationalism and survivalism, and then the more extreme thing of survivalist ethos, and then that becomes even more extreme, could be, and quite dangerous, of course, can become. But it seems to me that the old way of Aboriginal people looking at it, we are made up of both those things. All humans, probably all life forms, are made up of those things. But humans having this other idea of not just the sacred, what's the word? Motive, the reflective motive, not the unreflective motive, but the reflective motive, and just simply working things out. There's that word, I forget now. Using relationalism, the relationalist ethos, as a counter to the tendencies of I'm expecting my brother to come in a minute.
That was my partner who had a dressing gown.
Yes.
Wanted to ask me a question.
Yes.
It's because I'm using these things, so she didn't know I was.
So using relationalism, the relationalist ethos, as a counter to a survivalist ethos tendencies, because the tendency to see all of a sudden, because of experience, see everything around about and everybody around about as potential enemies or dangerous environment, and so on and so on. So I just think they work some things out, which has always, for me, in thinking about civilization, is a civilizational way of approaching or attaining, trying to attain a stable, secure society, you know, and because that's hard enough anyway. And it's always fascinated me why even the Aboriginal language map, if there had been lots of invasions, there would be far fewer languages. You know, you could see it, you can tell, but there are a whole lot who are seen as among themselves, it seems, from what I've learned anyway over the many years, they're all interdependent or autonomous. So you can have a big fight. You don't have to love your neighbour, thank heavens. But if you don't get on, you can have a big fight about something or other, some breach of protocol or whatever. But you couldn't follow that up with taking over their country.
Yeah,
that seems to be the rule, you know. So you can fight on the land, but you can't fight over land, which ends up being so many different regions, interdependent regions, and so on and so on. But even working at that, though, working at it, not just leaving it at that, but working at it as in, well, how do you keep that going? Well, it seems as if not fighting, resisting the temptation, or choosing not to fight over resources. Actually, not just sharing resources, but managing them, and not competing over them. That seemed to be pretty popular, from what I've heard, from what I've been told when I've travelled around, and of course historical stuff here. You know, so you don't necessarily, nobody's like we're all friends and kumbaya and join hands, all that kind of stuff. But you just have this particular relationship, relationalism, a relationalist ethos. Yeah, something like that.
And that would that relationism, does that extend to animals and plants and
yeah.
and probably
well, the land, yeah.
And you can't contradict the dreaming, right? Because
No.
that's in the
Yeah.
If that's got a law about that country, then our individual human lives are just small lives passing through.
Yes. And even if they are small lives passing through your mob's land, region, other way, for various things, because they all, you know, what do you call, trading between each other too, and all that's going on. And of course the Asian mobs, you know, some of them from Indonesia, coming and going, nearly 2,000 years, 1800 years, apparently. But they never came to stay and take over. So it strikes me, I'd love to find out from linguists, Aboriginal or white linguists or whatever, about Aboriginal languages, if there is a word for invasion even. No, because there's, in our language, there is a war, Yugambeh language, there are words for things like battle and fight and war, even war, you know, murder, attack, duel, feud, every different aspect of conflict you can think of, but not to invade. You know, invade, conquer, subjugate, you know, meaning take over land. Doesn't seem to be there, which I don't know for sure if that's so or not. I've been asking various people. Uncle, now he's very old, Lewis, from Adelaide.
Lewis O'Brien.
Yes, Uncle Lewis, yes. Well, I met him through Irene. He's so knowledgeable about language and everything. Oh my God. I know I asked him ages ago, and you know, is there a word for language invasion in the languages here? Because he knows more than one. He knows several languages apparently. He's so knowledgeable about things. You know him, obviously. Yeah. Geez, he's still going. Irene says.
Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, I just think sometimes what happened, the development, I would call it development, tens of thousands of years of development, happened here was quite unique. And you could say that it could have worked out anyway, but part of it I always thought was partly to do with fate. I don't know if that's right or not, but fate. A huge island continent, reasonably friendly with neighbours, didn't have to put up with half the things, not even a bit of things that happened in other continents, where completely different people could come in and invade that part of the country, or those people, the particular people. I'm talking about the difference between, like Mongols, Huns, I don't know, and the Europeans, or in any other continent, completely different. They attack or create some kind of warring system here, situation, that they displaces these people, they flee, and then they end up displacing other people. So just a whole lot of things, even in the, that story, the Tin Drum, the Great Gunter Grass. When it starts off, it talks about multiple wars where hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions, are being shifted backwards and forwards, and border lines are changing. 1 minute it's this country, it's called this. Next minute, after some other kind of shifting of populations, it's called something else. All of those things. I thought, so Aboriginal people didn't have to put up with any of that. It really was a mate of mine, Morgan Riggs, from Pulsus to Political Science. He calls it a long-term experiment in human order making.
Yeah.
And I thought that might have a lot to do with a civilization, what it is, what the experiments it's gone through, what it could be, a long-term experiment. And maybe especially after 10 or 12,000 years, so looking at what it could be for the next 10 or 12,000 years. Maybe, who knows, who knows. But human order making.
Yeah, and it fits in with what we started at the beginning, talking about what each territory can sustain. Because
that's exactly right.
Not a matter of trying to kill off your neighbours so you can take over the territory. But there are also the technologies of birth control.
Yes, yeah.
Because
Brilliant.
You couldn't afford to have too many mouths to feed in some parts of the country. So you had to have birth control.
Yes.
So that's another kind of
yes.
Experiment in
yes, human order making. Yeah. Are you talking about the kinship system and that?
Yeah,
because that's an amazing thing. How they, I don't know, who knows, experimented, natural, I mean, by just life, how do you prevent, in small societies, how do you prevent, now what did they used to call it, a close cousin marriage, there's that word for it, miss something, miss, it's no awful, I know it as well as anything, but they must have known, like all ancient peoples around the world, they must one of the first things they realized, if you can't have too close a relation marriage, because illnesses happen, so they worked out a system, and I'm really privileged to see a system actually mapped out on a map, which family can marry in, which members of a family can marry into that member of a family, but not this other family. It's all worked out. Promised marriages, that's what they call it. Yeah, promised marriages. And the health science people worked it out too with them. It worked out a program. Yeah, first time on computers, early computers, and they were just really moved, how they could have worked that out, and it stopped thing for basically forever. So all those old rules about who you should marry, who you shouldn't, maybe those things were known not for religious reasons, but became religious reasons, became the excuse of it, reasoning for it. I mean, I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah.
To invent that. Sorry. So
Is that what you meant, Stephen?
By which?
By birth control?
Oh yeah, that, and also the bush medicines.
oh yes, yeah. Bush medicines, everything that you ate and utilized. Unreal.
Yeah.
So there seems to be many points of similarity between both of you, and obviously the work that you both do is similar. I was wondering if I could ask about a possible point of difference, if that would be okay. So in your paper, Stephen, cultural science, the ecological critique of modernity and the conceptual habitat of the humanities. You describe all cultures as asserting an absolute core. I was just wondering if you thought that might contrast at all with Mary's position that all perspectives are valid and reasonable.
I better say what I meant by the core.
Yes.
And I could illustrate from the battle that we had up in the Kimberley over the gas plant. And I tried to imagine, actually I listened to what the people I work with up there. And I thought, if they're negotiating with the people who want to make the gas plant, the modernizers, and they have to give up certain things, what's the last thing they would give up? And they would have said, we can't let go of our law or our dreaming. And then I thought, well, what's the last thing that the white fella developers will give up? And I thought the core for them would be our right to exploit resources and make money out of it.
Absolutely.
And they're so different because they both depend on grabbing the country or looking after the country. So that's what I meant by the core values or whatever.
Could you go further than that and talk about the core meaning for other regions of work, or other cultures, I mean, something else, I wonder too, because also I don't know what I mean.
It would spin out into other domains, like like in economics. You know, I talk to those people up there and I say, what do you really love about you know, your country? And they say, oh, going fishing. And it's all about getting a good catch and being able to share it with family. And it doesn't cost you a penny. Whereas in the economics of the white fella system, they would say, oh, very good, you know, you should catch more fish and then you can sell it at the market for a profit.
Yes.
You know, put a price on it, turn it into money, and then it's worth doing.
Yes.
Whereas the people I'm talking to would say, oh no, I'm not doing any more fishing this weekend, I've got enough.
Yes. You have enough. Or you have enough for, you know, for you and your relatives and so on. Yes.
So it spins off into economics, and it would spin off into spiritual life, and it would spin off into you know, knowledge of plants and animals and what they're good for.
Yes. It's living and existing with, isn't it? Not to dominate or anything like that. Yeah. Go on. Sorry.
Yeah,
You were about to say.
I put that in such a way, Mary, that you're going to find it hard to contradict.
Oh God, yeah, no contradiction there. But but just the thing of when you talk about a core kind of thing, we were having a conversation the other day, just the other night actually, about being grounded, but then having a central, a moral center, you know. Now, in a way, I don't think it's like a moral center so much for Aboriginal people, unless you want to see the law as it's the ultimate moral thing, you know. But it's grounded at the same time, and they seem opposing between something grounded and something central, you know, centered, a bit like a core, you know what I mean, a core sort of thing. And I'm just wondering about that. Not just
so
because
I
they're different.
would,
Yeah.
yeah. When I say core, I'm not thinking at all of something inside the individual at
No,
all.
no.
Like
In the
soul
culture.
or like soul
No.
or deep psychology of what I've learned from the old man up in Bryn was everything was kind of externally oriented, and
yes,
he had no interest in questions of mind or
no,
or interiority. Because, as you say, grounded literally meant grounded. It was
literally meant grounded. Yes.
This is what's in this place, and this is what's in that place over there. And
that's right. Yeah. Yeah. That's why. I'd been trying to, as I said, starting off was trying to understand how whitefellas do things or how they think and that. And I thought sooner or later came across logic or philosophy itself, but especially the thing of logic and so on. And I thought, do we have that? You know, basically sorting out our thoughts, but especially that goes with behavior, conduct, I should say, you know, conduct and things like that. And it just seems, again, looking at the taking into account everybody's got their own region, you know, because their dreaming story is there, comes from a particular region, you know, so it's centered there. It's not, I think, therefore I am, it's I am located, therefore I am, sort of thing. So we're located. So everything about meaning and comes from that, from a particular place. So it works to me. It works out. All perspectives are valid and reasonable. If we want to talk about it in that way, because blackfellas don't talk about it in that way, but there are protocols and rules and so on about how you get on with your neighbours and conduct yourself, and rules, laws. I mean, straight laws, LAW and LORE, of course. All of that kind of thing. And they're still like that. I know I've worked in native title too. And because our lot here have relations with especially Stradbroke Island people up in the desert area, back in the foothills. And of course down to not over the Tweed, that's Bundjalung country, but relations with them too, you know. So you work at those things. So just seeing the whole continental island, so sort of like that, it just seems like everybody has their own, you know. Well, how I put it is multiple places, multiple dreamings, not just one, but several, multiple laws, sometimes overlapping, multiple truths, if you want to look at a truth. If you want to find out how things are, you're looking for a truth, but you happen to be in somebody's place, and whatever they say, that's the truth. You know, you can move on a couple of 100 miles to another place and they might have a different idea. Well, that's their truth, you know. So multiple perspectives, and all perspectives are valid and reasonable, but not right, not necessarily right, only valid and only reasonable to those people there, you know, from there. So you end up with, like what came out with all the arguments, as you probably know, all the rows and arguments among us, my mob down here too, among relatives, or your neighbours, about who are you talking for, what land are you talking for, and so on and so on. But the old system, before it was interfered with, you know, is that you have relations with your neighbours, You know, you have diplomatic traditions and heaps of protocols, not just a few, but heaps of them, and so on. You know, I sometimes think we probably were so old we'd even invented the term diplomacy, probably. If there was a word for diplomacy, it would have been, you know, human order making, how to get on, you know, how to, in the best reasonable way, especially reasonable. What's reasonable, you know? What's reasonable might point the way towards stability and security, instead of being well armed, you know.
Yeah, I certainly agree about the multiple.
Yes.
And in terms of our focus on Australian philosophy, then we probably don't have a branch of it, or maybe we wouldn't develop a branch called philosophy of mind in Australian philosophy.
No.
Because that's all about that, all that cognitive stuff and symbolic logic and the crafting of a cast iron argument that aspires to universality.
Yes, I could never understand that. Yes.
So that reminds me of listening to a countryman make a speech years ago, and he was addressing quite a big crowd.
Who was that, Luke? Sorry.
It
doesn't matter. Don't mention.
Doesn't matter, but he was addressing a large crowd, and I thought his speech was. I was a young fellow, you know, naive at the time. I thought his speech is rambling a bit, you know. Like, what's the logic here, or you know, how's his thinking going? And I thought it's too many contradictions and jumping around a bit. And then I thought about it a while afterwards, and I thought, actually, he's got a diverse audience there. He's got people from one mob and another mob and different kinds of relatives, and he's got to try to cover all those positions in one speech. Not easy.
Not easy at all.
And they're not going to accept it if he just says, okay, this is what I think, you know, I'm going to lay down the law here.
Yes, absolutely. Wrong step.
Somehow he's got to bring them with him, and it sounds to the white fella ear like he's contradicting himself, but to his audience, he's doing the right thing.
You're doing the right thing. That's right. Yes. Yes. And that does relate to that conduct, though, too. You know what I mean? It's not just what he says and what he doesn't say, or his tone or his way of talking, or if he's got relations with various people in the audience, or a whole lot of things. It is a whole lot of things about his way, and they would have seen that. They would have seen that he's trying to, you know, basically like do this diplomatic thing. They would have seen that. Probably have different words for it, you know. I've always loved the word proper, the proper way to do things, you know. You know, you can hear Aboriginal people, they seem to have adopted certain English words, but that's one of the favourite. I've heard that from one side of the end of the country to the other, you know, people out west and so-called remote, you know, areas. What's proper?
Yeah, well, that can be developed into a philosophical concept.
Yes, yes, I thought so too. And well, we were just talking about that with because I tried to read a whole lot of things as I was getting older, starting off with the Greeks. Not understanding it very well at all until much later. So started on Asian stuff, a whole lot of Asian stuff, you know, Confucius mainly, you know, but realizing that they themselves, the whole of Asia has a whole range of different philosophies and religions and everything, you know. But yeah, so I was thinking of it, and then much later I come across this word, the opposite meaning of the word hubris. I was actually looking for that, hubris, which is a Greek word apparently. But this is in WikiLeaks, and oddly enough, they said, well, there isn't any opposite word of hubris, which I thought was very strange. Then I thought that's the fault of WikiLeaks, go and do some research somewhere else. But the meaning, they have a word, the meaning of the opposite, so sophrosine or something like that. And it means how to be worthy of what's proper.
Okay.
And I was very pleased with that, because the word proper comes into it. That's what it actually means in the Greek translation of the word sophrosine, how to be worthy of what's proper. And it struck me then, that's a little bit like, especially older people, elders, the Bill, Uncle Bill Needy, you've heard of,
Yeah,
did you ever meet him?
No.
Oh, you didn't? No, I never met him. But just going by from what I've heard about him and his words in that book, Story of Feeling, it was written with other people. He just struck me as that kind of person. So lots of different people, usually older, but it could be younger, might grasp that principle, grasp hold of it.
Yeah,
To be a person of knowledge, a knowledgeable person, or an elder, if you call it that, or whatever word is, But I was really pleased with that. I thought, especially with the word proper, I thought, here we are, Aboriginal people using that, not just the proper way to make an omelette, or to build something, but it is practical, pragmatic too, pragmatic, being true to it too, not shonky, but not shonky in the other way too, moral or ethical way.
Maybe it is in the maybe it's in a bit in the Greek Epicurean tradition of
Right.
of how to live the good life.
Right.
Which may involve the right way to make an omelette.
Yes.
Because that's why they use that word Epicurean for good living magazines or whatever.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yes.
But more
yes.
more philosophically, it's about the proper way to conduct oneself.
Conduct yourself.
How to be worthy of what is proper, as you said.
Yeah, yes, something like that, eh? Yeah. But that brings me to the other thing, which is connected, I suppose, to civilizational stuff. Is it just seems like a real obvious, I don't know if it's a truth or what, or an observation, that if you do the right thing, if a society or whatever, a culture or society does the right thing, it's also strategic. I mean, they're doing the right thing can't possibly be wrong or something like that. I know it sounds a little bit Machiavellian, like somebody could pretend to be put on a pretense of trying to do the right thing, and they don't mean that at all, or they're leading somebody up the garden path or something, But it just struck me, why don't governments help millions of people who are homeless and with no good health care and so on? Do you know what I mean? When they've got the money, the richest country in the world doesn't have a national health service. It just strikes me as lack of common sense or something. You know what I mean? You would think in a civilization, that's what you indeed do, Do you know? And I think in relation to that sort of thing, of the Chinese, they see themselves as a civilization, not a state. But they are also a civilizational state. So without democracy, they could bring hundreds of millions of people out of abject poverty, literally hundreds, 700, 800, something like that. Millions of people out of poverty, all without no two-party things or anything like that. And it strikes me, well, nobody could deny that's the right thing to do. That's the ethical thing to do. That's the thing that rulers, democratic or whatever, should do. But they don't. And to me, I can't help thinking that kind of thing is very related to civilization. If those things don't come into what civilization is, well, I don't know. I know a lot of Indigenous people would do that, they'd choose that kind of way. Not just us, of course, others too.
Yeah, that's really interesting what you say about I forget exactly how you said it, but setting yourself on the right path, you can't do wrong. Something like
yes.
that.
Oh, yeah. Who said that?
You did.
Oh, right.
So,
Yes. Oh, yes. Sorry. So
like
I'm
that,
saying
so.
I agree with that. Yes. Well, that's exactly what Confucius said, and a whole lot of wise, philosophers, and they've all said that. But I don't see why governments who are, I know they only have interests, they don't have ethics actually, they only have interests, but you'd think in purely self-serving interests of their own, they would do that. So that's what big thing I couldn't understand,
Yeah,
It's unanswerable, is it, do you reckon? Or
yeah, it makes you want to resort to words like evil or something.
yes. But yeah, especially when it comes to civilization, Yeah. Because to me that's to me, well, talking about core, that's what I would think of as a core thing of how how a society could or give it a go.
Speaking of evil, I think that might be a
Yes.
good point to
Enter evil.
bring
Yeah.
in. Stephen wrote a piece on resistance that I found really interesting.
Oh, totally.
I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about that. Particularly, I'm enjoying quoting you. You say the enemy wants to escalate the situation to get things done, but the war of resistance has all the time in the world. I was wondering if you'd still hold that position now, given the constraints placed on us by climate change.
Oh, yeah, good question. No, you're right. It doesn't. We don't have all the time in the world, but I guess things are going at different speeds in different places and for different reasons.
Very true.
And the strategies of resistance impose themselves where at certain points where things are going too fast in the wrong direction, they reckon, and so you slow them down. A slowing down that forces reconsideration, negotiation, and then maybe a better decision is made.
So is that disruption?
Yeah,
the slowing down?
Yeah, but it could be all sorts of ways of strategies of slowing down. You could use the bureaucracy against itself. You could, bring in your own lawyers and say, hang on, what about clause 25? And then they have to go away and think about that, or a more activist on-the-ground actions like setting up a blockade, which we did up in Broome. And eventually they did make the right decision about that gas plant.
Yeah.
Not for the reasons they thought they made it, but in the end it didn't go ahead. So that was just a little paper that was trying to tease apart the strategies of resistance and making. I think I made into 5 different types. And
could you say what they are? Oh, right. Okay. Or even a couple.
One of them was use the strategies of the enemy against the energies of the enemy against themselves, which is a bit like martial arts, where you're fighting and you make your opponent fall over because they're using too much energy to try to defeat you. Another one was disappearance, which not providing any resistance at all. But when the police came up to Broome and went down the road in a V formation to disrupt the protesters, they found there was nobody there, and so everybody had melted into the bush, and so they had to go home and And all the people in this town started grumbling then, and they said, "Oh, what a waste of taxpayers' money."
That's
That's
brilliant.
brilliant.
And there was then they used culture as resistance. Again, a blockade on the road where they did an imitation of Michael Jackson's
Yes.
one of those songs.
Thriller?
Hey?
Was it Thriller?
Thriller, yeah, Thriller.
Thriller,
So
yeah.
they had the music blasting through speakers, and they put masks on, and they did the dance. And the police just sort of said, you're blocking a public access. But the news of this culture went viral. Everybody said, "Oh, what a great idea!"
That's great.
And so they used culture in a situation where there was no culture.
Jeez, yes.
And the Daniel Rowe, the great-grandson of the old man I used to work with, he had a different idea of resistance again, which was more like a tracking one. He said, we just walk along, we don't confront them directly, we walk along in parallel and look for a opening or look for some sort of sign. And so that was like tracking an animal in the bush. You just follow it down in parallel, and then you do what you have to do at a certain moment.
Yeah, brilliant.
So I was going against the meaning of the original word in Latin, which is to stand firm.
Going against that, yes.
Because if you just stand firm against something, you're going to get bulldozed or burn out.
Yes, of course. Or just simply arrested.
Yeah.
And removed from the scene in that way. Yeah. Jeez.
Yes, I enjoyed that one.
That was a great paper.
Yes.
I really like that idea of tracking.
Tracking, yes.
And it reminded me of your paper, Mary, where you talk about hunting liberalism.
Oh yeah, tracking liberalism. Yeah. Exactly like tracking. Yeah. As in, seeing what its environment is like or was like. Its style of, the style of the thing that we're tracking, and its history or ancestors, all that kind of stuff. Yes. Yeah. No, I like that.
That's a way of knowing which doesn't depend on reading words or purely on language. You're looking at somebody's style and their gestures and their what they leave behind in their wake. And
And I reckon you could see what was coming after by hunting and tracking. You could see what was coming after, or giving birth to neoliberalism. You could see that ahead, by tracking in that way.
Wonderful, wonderful.
What their what do you call strategies are, tactics and strategies. So it'll just get worse, of course, and of course it does, or did, Yeah. So, but yes, but yes, back to civilization. Were you thinking of writing something? I mean, that was in the conversation. That's a small paper. Was that a small? Or are you going to, or have you written a larger piece to dealing with the same thing? Because the way I've been thinking about it is that it's become sort of urgent. Absolutely urgent. Like when we talk APRG, the idea of trying to settle an Australian philosophy, the traditional thing of working out a philosophy, it usually takes maybe years and centuries, because somebody else answers that one or criticizes that one, and off they go. The whole thing is developed and developed, and really, in this sense, it's running out of time. So for this too, just the kind of civilization, what kind of global system should there be? And already some of the other things I've read is about that, well, other things haven't worked. Religion is, for a lot of people, it's bankrupt, morally bankrupt. There's no more Marx waiting in the wings. Nobody liked that, waiting in the wings to give advice about what a good way to give something a go, give a particular way, ism a go, try this. So it's like as if the hunt, another kind of hunt, is on for what kind of global governance could come into being. Do you know what I mean? Is there room, or is it possible? Or does it all depend on great big chaotic a war, basically, and then seeing what comes out of when the smoke is cleared, that kind of thing after the big battle, or people starting to work out something now, but of course, it can't be worked out without ideological thinking in a way, or can it? Do you think? Can it, or?
Then maybe you need a bit of ideology to the extent that you've got to use some concepts that, as my friend Leslie Green in Cape Town says, you can't solve the problems with the same ideas that created them.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so you're hunting for new concepts, and that might be a little bit ideological. But I do see a glimmer of hope in international Indigenous collaborations.
Yes, yeah.
I heard my friend Tony Birch give a paper on one of these Zoom things earlier in the year, and we had to read an article of his. I forget the name of it. But I got to ask a question. I said, I was really struck, Tony, by how many references you had to Indigenous peoples in other parts of the world. And I said, this is a kind of little bit of a new thing. These links and this network formation and this sharing of ideas, where, as you said, Mary, Indigenous peoples can more or less, depending on their situation, carry on as they always have.
Just carry on.
And then tell each other, we are carrying on as we always have. And this is how we have to make adjustments for.
Of course, yes. That's right.
contemporary world, but we're doing our best to carry on as we were, and let's keep each other informed.
Yes, yes.
And the common problem of climate change is facilitating that, I think.
Yes, yes. God, that's a real right there in your face kind of problem, eh? I live on the coast, so the idea of the seas coming in and taking land and houses, that's the next thing. It has happened before, but there's a kind of very clever, I don't know what you call it, but it's on a electronic, on the computer. You can see things into the future with the rise of waters, what places, like Britain, would look like. And it's practically gone, like in, I don't know, so many years, a couple of decades. So a lot of the Gold Coast here might be underwater, the flat parts, and all various, of course, there's islands in the Pacific, things like that. So, yeah, so running out of time is a very real thing. So, I don't know, Simone and Michelle. Well, does that mean we have to have put philosophy on the fast track? Can we fast track philosophy or something like that, or at least some advice to do with governance anyway? Because the state is, my God, it's not going to wither away anytime, and now it's a servant of corporations. you know.
Yeah, indeed.
Geez,
Yeah.
what could, it's impossible to fight that, eh? Well, as you say, don't fight it. Try other ways. Yes.
Yeah.
Mm.
How do you see it playing out, Stephen? Just a small question.
The state and everything.
Yeah. No, there's going to be a lot of pain and suffering. There's going to be lots of. It's almost like I imagine the panic over boat people is like a precursor to all those Bangladeshis are going to have to find somewhere to go when the Ganges Delta is underwater and half of Bangladesh is gone.
Yes.
What can they do except jump on a boat and head towards Western Australia or something?
Yes, yeah. What can they do?
So there are going to be big issues like that, but let's hope that sanity can prevail.
Yes, yeah. I don't know.
Are you hopeful, Mary?
Well, it's a mixture, really. I am hopeful. And partly because of the work of a whole lot of people to do with just climate change, itself, and young people. I both feel sorry for them and feel good about that they, want to do things, actually want to get moving on things. But I feel sorry for them because part of it depresses people too. They are depressed, young people, and they're worried because they don't see all that much happening on that other level, government level. Government is, yes, business as usual kind of stuff, and that is a bit depressing everybody, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah, really, but I always think our own old lot, and a lot of other people as, just sort of taking up some of those old ideas, about looking after the place outside of the self, looking after something outside of the self, not religion, not ideology, and in a sense, not even philosophy, because not speculating about it, I like that German word, Stephen, Weltanschauung. You've heard that, eh?
Is that the same as worldview sort of thing?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I've always liked that because I was thinking, what could you call our system? It has elements of things like religious, a sense of awe and all the kind of that stuff, and of course ceremonies and stuff. But I like that word because it's a worldview. It's a way of looking at reality. So you looking at reality, you kind of got to look at everybody else's view too. You can't stop it. You can't, It suspends judgmentalism. That's what I like about it. So,
Stephen, can I ask how you've seen things, especially, because you wrote that early paper on philosophy and the lack of engagement with Indigenous philosophy, how you've seen things change over the years in that realm, or if you've seen things change? Is there greater engagement, or do you think it's still very much?
Like Mary, I have a lot of hope in the younger generation coming up, and when I started talking about Indigenous stuff decades ago, there was only white people writing about it or researching it, really. And now I'm happy to say that I'm quite redundant.
Not quite. Yeah.
And and I can just tell stories about the old days and stuff. But so there are these all sorts of young people coming up doing great stuff. I've got a collaboration going with Max Preti, who's down the corridor from you apparently. And
deadly.
He's got a philosophical turn of mind. And he's interested in doing an analysis of the white fella dreaming. What do they mean when they if we use the Indigenous concept of dreaming and attach it to white fellas, what are their myths and beliefs, and as if they were foreign. So yeah, so in terms of philosophy departments in universities, I haven't done a survey lately, but I still suspect there's not much well, Aboriginal or Indigenous philosophy, or indeed Australian philosophy, because you could teach a course called Australian philosophy, which interrogates just what might be meant by such a thing, without having to treat it as established knowledge that already exists.
Yeah, brilliant. That's a good way of beginning. Yeah. Yes.
And so, what ways could doors start to open into modes of thinking that we could call Australian? When I read that ancient modern book, I immediately went and looked at fields like African philosophy.
Yes, Ubuntu. You mean Ubuntu? No.
And a bunch of different things.
Right.
Like African American, or stuff happening on the continent of Africa, where you might have somebody writing about Kikuyu philosophy or something. So there's heaps across the American stuff and the African continent stuff, right through to the more political stuff of people like Fanon or the other critical theorists of today, like M.A. Cesar or
Edward Said.
Yeah, so heaps of stuff. Too much to disentangle.
Yeah.
But when you come to Australia, you've got slim pickings.
Do you think changing that would help to change some of the action, or do you think there would still be a disconnect between the two?
What kind of action?
Yeah, well, in terms of stopping the destruction of the natural world. Because it seems like in talking to Mary, you have that idea of the survivalist ethos versus the relationalist ethos. And I guess my thinking is, if we could change perhaps from that survivalist more to a relationist way of thinking, would we then behave in a more relationist way, or would there still be a disconnect between our habit and our...
Yeah, I think these changes are slow, but we can always try to talk about what's not going right. But you can also just as equally say, oh, there's an example of the kind of philosophy I'm interested in being put into practice. And you could point to regenerative farming, for instance.
Yes, yeah.
And who's the guy who wrote the book about the reed warbler, Charlie Massey. So that's a beautiful book about regenerating his country in wherever it was, Victoria, over many years. He talks in detail about how he was consulting with the local countrymen. And it might have been the countryman who said something about that reed warbler bird will come back.
Oh, yes, I know what you mean, yes.
And that was a magical moment when he heard the call of the reed warbler.
Yes.
The old billabong again.
Yes, that is wonderful. That's be a wonderful way of starting off, actually.
Yeah, so regenerative farming is just one thing. You've got community gardens, you've got other forms of climate action happening. That Indigenous group of young people in Victoria called Seed Mob.
Oh yeah.
Bruce Pascoe down in Victoria.
Oh yes,
growing native grasses again for seed.
And the bread, he's experimenting with the bread from it, apparently it's wonderful.
Yeah, so I think there are lots of things we can point to as good developments and say, okay, well, we'll network with them.
Yes, yes, oh, that's great. But I love that one about the reed warbler. I thought there's something very there's definitely something spiritual there. It's definitely something really like, I don't know, psychic or spiritual, you know. I thought, oh, that'd be wonderful. That'd be wonderful. Especially for Australians, you know, because sometimes I talk about actually looking at the history of why they come here and the differences between different new states that come from colonialism, you know. So the reasoning why the Americans, they're different history, you know, and different again from the Spanish, of course, earlier than them. So God is on their side, but they fled because they were getting a hard time back in the UK. But God was on their side, so it's not unusual that they tend to think like that they're God's own people, you know, that they're, you know, and America is God's own country kind of thing, manifest destiny, all that kind of stuff, you know. Whereas Australians, the people who became Australians, they're, in a sense, God, the country, kicked them out, basically. They were hunted out of the garden, you know, weren't wanted by their mob. So both what do you call it, survivalist, but the one here is survivalist, but always looks for, or has to look for, some kind of protection of a larger power, you know, of some sort. No religion, you know, not a religious, but the American one is a religious kind of thing, you know. But what I'm saying is not necessarily starting off with those things, but in this pursuit of Australian philosophy, perhaps many historians, I suppose, could tackle some of those things, could talk about some of those things. Some of the old ones, what was his name? His name was Clark too, wasn't it? Oh no, Manning Clark. Yeah.
Manning Clark, yeah.
He tried to do that, eh? Do you reckon? Do you think he tried to do that?
I didn't read his massive history of
right.
Australia, but
Mm.
I was concentrating on other things at the time.
Of course. Yeah, no, of course. Yeah, but I thought he kind of was a bit influenced by or religious or biblical kind of the language anyway. And he talked a bit like that. But
Oh, right, yeah.
I think I'm not quite sure. But yeah, so at some point they're and of course what goes with that beginning is the treatment of Aboriginal people, of course, and of course for the Americans the treatment of Indigenous people over there too. And I'm always thinking that there's always, what do you call it? Consequences.
Mm-hmm.
Even for over centuries and centuries. I think of the Irish, you know, 800 years of fighting back against the English, apparently, against their colonialism. So sooner or later, I don't know, something will happen, or something will arise, some things will arise where things have to be dealt with, but in a proper way. Again, back to that word proper, proper way. You know, not a half-hearted way, or a way of, oh, well, we better get this over and done with kind of thing. I can't help thinking about that in the Albanese's support for the voice. I don't doubt his sincerity, but it seems like, well, we'll get this out of the way first and then move on to other things. You know, I can't help that think or feel. I sense it. I don't think it. I kind of sense it. So, but yeah, I don't know. All part of this of the the hunt for the Australian philosophy. Yeah, but the reed warbler, that would be a wonderful beginning. And the idea of a reed warbler, would be really wonderful.
There's another book called Where Song Began, which I haven't read either, but I've
right.
I've seen performances based on it, and it's the songbirds of Australia are pretty unique, apparently.
That's right. Yes, I think I remember reading something or a doco about that too. They're amazing. No, it couldn't have been, because birds are all over the world. But yeah, there's, for some reason they are. It's a unique thing in the birds in this country, bird song in this country. Eh? Yes. Yeah.
And which reminds me of the importance of song in Aboriginal tradition. You know, no law without the songs that go with it. And so our Australian philosophy might have to be paying attention to the poetics of country.
Yes.
And songs that belong to particular places. And
yes. Yeah.
I don't think we've scratched the surface of that one.
No, you're quite right, you know. And Gil, hey, he when we first started talking about all this, he was very interested, and still in the whole thing of song lines and things like that, because they're sort of a kind of a trail themselves, really, you know, and so on. I thought that would be fantastic to start off like that. Yes.
Yeah,
but,
just as an anecdote on that, the old man I talked to, I was also doing maps with him and writing place names, and he would name the places along a track, and then he would start singing. He'd start singing in order to sing the song to get the name of the place. So that made me think. Song comes before the map, becomes before the story.
Yes. That's what. Well, I have heard that somebody saying, you don't need a map, actually, physical map. The map is inside you. Yeah, all that sort of thing. So I know it so well. But I meant to say before, we were talking about something else, I think. In New South Wales somewhere, there's a dry out place, you know. Did I say this?
No?
I'm so forgetful. I forget whether I've already said something or not, you know. Getting older and all that. But anyway, a dry out place with Aboriginal people there, health people there. Look, you're sitting in the sun. Do you want to move? Or do you want to? I can see.
I'll just bring this blind down a bit.
Yes, you must be hot. Oh, there. That's better. Yeah, that's a little. Anyway, they're part of their. They have various health, what do you call it, healing things and so on for alcohol and drugs and that. But one day, one of them asked about, where did alcohol come from? How did it come into the world? They meant, you know, and what they really meant was, what's the dreaming story of alcohol? That's what they wanted to know. They didn't want to know. They'd been learning all about the health dangers of it. They didn't want to know how it's made, you know, wine or beer, hops, all that kind of stuff. They wanted to know where the thing came from. How did it come into the world? So they thought about it and then decided, the health people, the health mob, Aboriginal and white fellas, they thought, well, what they'll do is they'll perform this play about Dionysius.
Oh, yeah.
Dionysius. And so they did. And it's pretty bloodthirsty, apparently, the whole thing, what happens to Dionysius, you know. And they were apparently, the story goes, they were quite amazed, you know, because you know there's some old Aboriginal people, or some Aboriginal people used to say, or I know they might still, you know, the white man has no dreaming, hasn't got a dreaming, you know. But these fellows saw, well, they recognised it straight away. Oh, this is a dreaming story. They knew that was, even though it's, you know, it's a Greek, it's from far away. And these fellows here, they must have brought that here with them, but that belongs somewhere else. But it is a dreaming, it's recognisable to the Aboriginal, you know, observation that it's a dreaming story. And I don't know whether it made a big impact, like, you know, they all got well and stopped drinking and all that, but it made some kind of impact, apparently. Just the fact.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, isn't it a wonderful story? I thought, oh, geez.
Yeah, because the normal story about alcohol is really boring. You know, like.
Oh, yes.
It's bad for your liver.
Yeah, it's bad for your liver. Oh, it's fascinating, and how it's made, you know, and how many years. And
yeah, well, that's a little bit more interesting.
A little bit.
But the myth is really important.
Yes.
Let's never say that myths should be eradicated or done away with, because they continue.
Yeah. I thought it was wonderful that they recognized it straight away, and of course, dreaming stories, they're in everywhere, all over the world, I guess, too, hey?
Absolutely, yeah.
Wouldn't be surprised if there's one about rice wine, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
But somehow there is a truth in all of that, isn't it? It's it's easy to say it's a spiritual truth, I suppose, but it's a deeper kind of thing about existence or something. I don't know. Do you think?
Yeah, and I think these myths are always there, even in the neoliberal ideologies of progress.
Yes.
That is itself a myth.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. Myth making.
Because it involves a little bit of magic, and you have to suspend disbelief and go along with it.
Go along with it, yes.
Otherwise, you're in trouble.
Yes. Yes. I was thinking afterwards, gee, they could use that as a kind of part of the health thing in general. Do you know what I mean? Everywhere. I don't know about AA, but, could be AA. A lot of people say they, the ones who go to AA, they don't like the religious part of it. Well, they should put that on,
Put that play on. You're right.
Put that play on, even video kind of thing, because they're singing in it, I think, and but it is bloodthirsty. Apparently, he gets torn from limb, apparently.
So full of passions.
It's full of passions. Yeah.
And what happens to philosophy when you take the passion out of it, I wonder?
Well, yes, that's right. We have interesting talks about that, eh, Simone?
Yeah.
Feeling,
Absolutely. There's a long history of that being denied in philosophy, isn't there?
Yes. Yeah. But in science too, eh? In science, I think they get worried about it.
So then restoring feeling is important, as well as making myths, and the two are connected. So would you?
I think so.
Do you reckon so? Yeah. Especially if we're pursuing a philosophy or something to do with meaning. Some meaning has to be gleaned from everything that's happened.
Yeah, because to reduce it to a mathematical formula or something perfectly rational is to deny yourself a number of tools. I think that probably the most effective philosophy is one that mobilizes the feelings as well as the thoughts, as well as the as well as the spiritual dimension.
Yes.
I'm trying to think of everything that is in the Dionysian myth.
Yes.
It's all those things. If you say we're going to cut everything out except the rational,
you're in big trouble.
the kids in the philosophy class are going to get bored for a start.
Well, they are. Yes. Yeah. Yes, exactly.
But the diehard philosophers, the logicians, will scoff at you, and they'll say there's only one level of reality.
Yeah, same. It's such a pity.
That might involve something on the table. You know how they do that?
Oh, yes.
I lost my video there.
The diehard philosophers heard you.
And if they ever heard of such a thing as an Aboriginal logic, they'd just, oh my God. Yes, they would just refuse it, to even acknowledge such a thing could possibly exist,
Not all logicians. I've met some wonderful
really?
logicians who are very
really?
open to such things, but there is a certain portion of philosophy that is very closed off to.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I should point out, now that you say that I'm operating without a license here. Like, I didn't do philosophy at uni or anything. I've just picked up bits and pieces along the way, and so real philosophers would
Yes.
ask me to get my license out, and
Well, check
I'm
you
sorry,
up.
I'm sorry, officer, but I didn't ever get one.
No, not at all.
Yes, that's
There's-
exactly how I started. Yeah. Yes,
And there's
Robert.
plenty of philosophers that critique that as well.
Ah.
Plumwood, for example,
Mm.
Michel Ledurf, lots of feminist philosophers critique that, the
Ah.
dualism between reason and emotion.
Yes,
of
yes,
course, yeah.
yes,
Mm.
yes. That's why I love that story, Story of Feeling by Bill Nighy. You
Mhm.
know, the story of, and he just explains it. You know, when you read it, he's more or less saying feeling is what makes us human.
Mm.
Feeling, yeah. And I thought, I think I believe that, partly because he said it, but I think that's right too.
No, absolutely.
Mm.
Well, the opposite's certainly been true throughout history, is when we do deny feeling and emotion, and we dehumanize. It's been the basis for lots of dehumanization over the years.
That's what I couldn't understand too. Yeah. Yes, right. Anyway, I was just wondering if
Sure.
wrap
it up.
Yeah, is that all
Yeah.
right? Or,
Mhm.
yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's been wonderful, Stephen.
Yeah,
Jeez,
that was a good chat.
I wouldn't mind more talks if you're not too busy, or you probably are busy.
Blue country, not the brim.
The Children's Country, sorry, chapter 8.
Yeah, it's an excursion onto Galarabaloo country, north of Broome, walking the country. And the final chapter is about what the civilization thing that you saw a short version of. So I'll send you that book, and
oh, that's lovely. Oh, thank you. I was just writing it down. I could have bought it. Yeah, because I buy books online too. But yes, no, that'd be wonderful. I wonder if you could pick out, when they have books online, sometimes you can go straight to the chapter too. But yeah, no, I'd rather read the whole book.
Yeah, and I can send it to you as both a hard copy and a PDF.
Oh, PDF, yes, okay, that'd be better. Yeah, would you mind? Yeah.
No.
Oh, that.